I would now like to invite Mrs. Mary Robinson, former President of Ireland and President of the Mary Robinson Foundation Climate Justice, a long-standing champion in the area of human rights. Mary will speak to you on the importance of social sustainability.
I'm delighted to have the opportunity to take part in this 15th anniversary meeting, because I was involved in the UN Global Compact right from the beginning, serving as UN High Commissioner for Human Rights from 1997 to 2002, and I well remember Kofi Annan's speech, first of all at the Davos meeting in 1999, and then the formal launch of the Global Compact in the year 2000. And I was interested because it was quite a radical departure, a radical initiative of then Secretary General Kofi Annan to engage wider players on the values of the United Nations. I've always believed that the greatest asset of the United Nations is its values. But it was quite a radical step to reach out to business, to trade unions, and to wider civil society and invite them to join in a global compact. I was, of course, very pleased that the first two principles of the Global Compact were to uphold the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and not to be complicit in its violations. At that time, the tripartite nature of the Global Compact was essential in order to build trust, because there was a conflicted relationship, to say the least, between business and human rights in particular. And there was a lot of emphasis on the fact that at local level, many violations of human rights are committed by or on behalf of corporations. And of course, that's still true. And if we look at human rights defenders, it's the environmental activists now, in the context of addressing issues of sustainability, who very often suffer the worst impacts, imprisonment and even death. I think it's very important that the Global Compact was launched and that the wisdom was there to extend a kind of relationship on values, which is what the Global Compact is, to business, to trade unions, and to the wider civil society. Of course, there were teething problems of the Global Compact, and I recall in my capacity as UN High Commissioner for Human Rights up until 2002, and then for a number of years as a board member of the UN Global Compact and indeed chair of its Human Rights Committee, that I was like a sort of older sister to poor Georg Kell. I kept urging him to try and build in more accountability, to make it more rigorous, to make it a real UN Global Compact that was not just allowing corporations to have what might be called a blue rinse occasion. And it is important, of course, to remember that the Global Compact has always been a voluntary commitment. And it's true that the governance and standards within the Global Compact reflect this, but they are also gradually being strengthened. I think it's important that there is more now due diligence internally within the Global Compact. It has grown from 841 business members and about 4,449 non-business members. And another very welcome development was the drawing up of sets of important principles for children, on women's empowerment that we marked with a big meeting here in the UN a few months ago, and during the Commission on the Status of Women. And I'm delighted to just learned this morning, that over 1,000 CEOs have now signed up to the women's empowerment principles, and that has to begin to make an impact on that particular glass ceiling. There are also the important principles on responsible investment, and these too are very important. I think they have to be taken very seriously, both the principles but also the UN Global Compact commitments themselves. And I think it is necessary for UN agencies to be more vigilant, I think, in scrutinizing corporations that they want to partner with, to do a sort of ESG assessment, just to make sure that that is true. Another important parallel development to the UN Global Compact, which I believe has the potential particularly to strengthen the first two principles, was the work of Professor John Ruggie as UN Special Representative on business and human rights. In the year 2000, the area of business and human rights was quite conflicted. But when Professor Ruggie was appointed in 2005, he worked very hard with his team over a period of 6 years, and they produced the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, which were endorsed by the Human Rights Council on the 16th of June 2011. And the Guiding Principles provide an authoritative global standard for addressing the adverse impacts on human rights linked to business activity wherever such impacts occur. They set out, as I'm sure you know, in 3 pillars: principles concerning the duty of states to protect their people from violations of their human rights by corporations, the need for all corporations they have responsibility to respect all human rights, and the need for greater access to remedies for victims of human rights abuse. It's significant that the corporate responsibility to respect exists independently of the state's ability or willingness to fulfill their own human rights obligations. And the UN Guiding Principles require that companies have a policy commitment to respect human rights as part of their due diligence and proactively take steps to prevent, mitigate, and where appropriate, remediate their adverse human rights impacts. So it's probably worth asking how many of the approximately 8,041 companies that are members of the Global Compact are fully compliant with the UN Guiding Principles on business and human rights. They weren't there in the year 2000, but they've been in place now for 4 years. And is this not a sufficient time to see them as constituting the standard of compliance with the first 2 principles of the Global Compact? The Secretary-General has emphasized the importance of the tripartite membership of the UN Global Compact in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals to be adopted in September here in New York, and the Climate Agreement to keep the world on course for a safe world in Paris in December. The role of business in mitigating emissions and moving to renewable energy, the role of trade unions in helping to advocate for and develop a just transition to a zero-carbon renewable energy world, and the role of civil society in championing climate justice will be indispensable to both global agendas. So members of the Global Compact can give a clear leadership on this in their commitment to sustainability. I wish the Global Compact all the best over the next 15 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mary. Lucky me to have such a wonderful sister. Really, thank you. She has always kept us on our feet and moving forward. Very important. And I'm so honored Professor John Ruggie is sitting here, brother in arm, and we will hear more later.